Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session, the first session of Kaar, which is focused on career mentorship for the Kashmiri Overseas Association youth. And this session is pretty much general today for mostly everybody, not just the youth. We have with us our speaker, Shri Rakesh Kaul ji from Jersey. Welcome, Rakesh ji, and thank you for joining us.
It's a privilege to be here with you, and thanks to KOA for sponsoring this event.
Great, thanks. We have with us the panelists, also from KOA Youth. We have, please go ahead and introduce yourselves. We have Manisha Munshi from California. She's the program director. And in the medical industry, I suppose also for medical industry is Nisha Munshi. She is from Ohio. Hi Nisha. We have Omesh Bhatt. He's an IT professional from New Jersey, New York area, if I'm not right, or finance. Okay, got it right. I live in Pennsylvania. My name is Amrita Kaar, and I'm also into a medical startup company who do 3D imaging. Rakesh ji, I would have liked to introduce you, but words are not enough. But I would like you to introduce and tell us a little bit more about yourself that we do not know, and we can go ahead with the chat and anything that you would want to share. Thanks.
Thank you, Amrita. So I've been asked to give a talk on entrepreneurship. A lot has been written on that subject. So I'm going to share something with you that's very different, very unique. My talk today will be on the inner game of entrepreneurship. In my talk, I will give you a framework for igniting creativity, techniques pioneered in Kashmir. And this creativity can be applied universally. What I will share with you is applicable for artists, poets, programmers, scientists, it's for-profits. The examples that I will give you in the Q&A, world of business, because that has been the sphere of activity that has occupied my professional endeavors. So, Amrita, you asked me a little bit of my background.
Yes, please. I could say it, but I would think you are the best person to introduce.
So very briefly, graduated from IIT Delhi, went to Baar University. I was the first Indian to work on solar cells. I was making them for NASA's space program. Got my MBA from the University of Chicago. Went into the consumer field. Worked for multi-billion-dollar companies, but remarkably, as I look back, every single company that I worked for, a company that was founder-driven. Today, if you fast forward, and I serve as chairman of several companies, some are reasonably large, some are startups. Again, I find myself that I gravitate towards and I support and incubate entrepreneurs. So I have seen pretty much the entire life cycle when it comes to creation of an enterprise. It's there that I sort of developed some unique perspectives. I then went back, obviously, over time, made some connectivity with what our indigenous knowledge systems were saying, and had a remarkable moment of epiphany. Oh, by the way, you should know this, not to sell this, but I actually, what I'm going to share with you in a very abbreviated way to interested Americans. I charged them $1,008 for a 4-hour course, and I don't do it for profit. I asked them to write a check to my favorite charity, which I think you know what it is, and probably would be your favorite charity too. So some of the stuff I'm going to share in a very abbreviated way with you is all stuff that actually Americans who I think have found it very useful. Would you like me to proceed with the main presentation?
Yeah, sure. Are you going to share it? You could share it, or you could speak as well about the charity. Is this the one in Jammu, the camp, the Jagati?
Yeah, I'm single-mindedly focused on the less fortunate in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So I
Yes.
have several charities, but they're all Jammu and Kashmir centric. In 2016, obviously, it was Jagti. We're going to do magic there. So let's get started.
Yes,
When
please.
it comes to creativity, stories of creativity tend to have a spontaneous aspect to it. And I will touch on that later on. But this talk is that it is a phenomena that can be ignited and through some simple practices and techniques that were lost, and most assuredly enrich your life. Whatever aspect of life you look at, you will look at it very differently because of the awakening that will arise from what I'm going to share with you. And what I'm going to share with you is creativity is not a spontaneous random event. It is a serial process you can create for yourself. In one sentence, what I'm going to teach you and share with you is that this system is based on self-awareness. And I can tell you that the results are guaranteed. Now, why is this important? Well, the first reason it's important, as time goes by, the only roles that humans will have that are meaningful in the future will be creative roles. Ones that you see today will be replaced by artificial intelligence with some minimal human oversight. So this is an imperative skill. We better all start picking it up because we've lost it. In text, this was the number one benefit that the indigenous knowledge systems promised. Now, the urgency of this underscored this weekend. And I don't know if you can see this, but this is a front page article in the Wall Street Journal today. Can you guys see it? I'm holding it up to the camera. An idea deficit, companies splurge
yes.
prices.
Well, it's a little pixelated, but if you could read it out, facing
deficit.
Facing an idea deficit, companies splurge on prices. That's right.
Remarkable, Amrita, the coincidence. A major consulting firm in that article that each year more than 30,000 prizes are awarded, totaling $2 billion, where companies and organizations are seeking creativity and innovation. What is very interesting in this trend, the top 200 prizes or so, they have tripled in value over the last 10 years. So that's an exponential increase. So I've come into the world of business through formal educational programs from three great universities: IIT Delhi, Brown University, University of Chicago. What is interesting is that the big budget, the formal MBA process-driven organizations, they are slowing down in innovation. It's not working. That's having an impact on economic progress. So what are these companies doing? They're going out into the open wide world, a problem, solve it. What is it that they are hoping to find in these open systems that the so-called experts inside are not able to? So my incentive for you is this. Creative is not just going to be a necessity, but it will become the royalty check that you get, new status symbol for the millennial generation. That's going to be the new status symbol, that somebody rewarded your creativity and is giving you a royalty check. So let's start on this journey. I'm not sure if you've ever gone on an inner journey. Has anybody ever gone a panel? It's kind of a different travel program, but I'll be your scout. I'll point out things to you. I'll share things with you. Relax, but concentrate, because as we travel on this inner universe, if you blink, you'll miss it. I will demand that you listen to me and concentrate. So let me first start with, why was it that Kashmir was a place that ended up incubating this knowledge? Well, clearly it was a knowledge center, but it was a fulcrum state. And because it was straddling the Silk Road, where essentially the world trade was conducted, the Kashmiris ended up being legendary entrepreneurs and traders. The advantage they had was that they were not only multilingual, but they were fearless travelers. For example, Kashmir spent more acharyas to China than all of India put together. And they were bearers of knowledge products, they were bearers of peace, they were bearers of wisdom. So they were welcomed everywhere. Obviously came trade. Oh, by the way, as an aside, for those of you who are Kashmiris, and I know that there are non-Kashmiris also on this call, but for those of you who are Kashmiris, you'll find this an interesting aside, that they also were the greatest frontier spies. And, we'll have a talk on that someday in the future. So in the first millennium, Kashmir was a center of global and import trade. Personally, I find it kind of interesting that all of the bookstores on the Silk Route, Indians, and I would speculate the majority of these bookstores were probably Kashmiris. I wish I had a bookstore in the first millennium on the Silk Road. That would have been kind of an interesting life. Kashmiris were always driven by innovation and creativity. They were relentless. They demanded that when an author, for example, wrote a text, in the introductory invocation, the author would be required to put down what was it that was new in the text that he was submitting. We are celebrating the 1,000-year anniversary of Abhinav Gupta. Abhinav, the polymath, greatest genius in the first millennium, if not the greatest, one of the greatest. His name means ever new, ever innovating. So there was a relentless drive. Many techniques, practical techniques were perfected, which I will take you through the journey. And it gave the Kashmiris an edge. And so it's not surprising, it'll make you guys laugh, that they were referred to as Jadugars. That they were thought of as people who could work miracles, their ability to innovate. So Let's begin. And the very first thing is this: the starting point of creativity, your life experiences that occur to you on a day-to-day basis. Here is the model is a full frontal engagement model. We embrace life in all of its manifestations. For us, the nonsense that life is an illusion, not for us that the best thing of life is outsourced to heaven. No, it's a full frontal engagement model. The world is very real. To embrace it. So the starting point for creativity is for you to look at the experiences that you have in your daily life. Step one in the technique, the Vagyan Bhairav Tantra, which is a celebrated text from Kashmir. It's a very simple practice, and I want you to start that today. It is that at night, before you fall asleep, start rewinding the day, think backward. Backward the moment you lay down in your bed, before your teeth, and go and retrace the day's journey and relive those experiences which had a strong emotional component. Right now, you and me and everybody, we are all bad boys and girls. When we sink into our beds, we reach for our iPhone, go on Facebook, see what all of us have been up to during the day, and that's fine. No problems. I do that too. But then when you shut off your phone, guys, start with this technique. And as you relive the experiences of the day, see if anything bubbles up that has a strong emotional component. Work, it could be something that happened while you were driving. It could be when you were interacting with somebody. It could be you were reading a paper on some scientific topic. Doesn't matter. Was there anything there that had a strong emotional component? Now, for some of us, maybe before going to bed doesn't work. Maybe we have a baby that we are trying to put to sleep. At least when my sons were very young and I'd be trying to put them to sleep, I would find that I would fall asleep before they did. So if that's not practical, then just pick a time in the day where you can just daydream. The whole idea is that we want to get your mind from its normal analytic mode into the associative mode. And we want you to start practicing this regimen. Now, what you'll find is if you start practicing this regimen, some interesting things will happen right away so that you can see the value of the technique. You'll find that actually your memory will start improving dramatically. And the reason is, now that you're training your mind, knows that at night you will retrace it. So now the mind will be much more observant without you realizing it. Your memory will go up. More interestingly, you'll fall asleep quicker, deeper, better because of this. So that's step one, really observing your experiences, seeing whether anything had emotional content so that you're switching from right brain to left brain. Now, let's move to step two. Step two, most of these emotions that you'll be experiencing are what I call temporal. They are there in the moment, they are fleeting, and they disappear. To be virtually the majority of the emotions that you experience. But time, there may be an emotion that doesn't disappear. It sort of stays there. It could be positive. More likely, it's a negative emotion. Now, our historical texts maintain that there are 33 emotions in total, of which are stable. Emotions are transitory, temporal, but there are 8 emotions that are more stable than the others. And when you see yourself experiencing this emotion, surfacing repeatedly, out of those stable emotions, there may be an emotion that has some energy to it. It may have some strength to it. It may have Shakti with it. And this emotion, which begins to have Shakti in it, into taking some action. So now, step 4, this action may be such that it may promote curiosity. You may say, you know what, this thing, I'm intrigued by it, persistently intriguing to me. I want to research it. I want to understand what happened here. And you start educating yourself. You talk to people who may have had the same experience. You do more research, you gain more knowledge. One day, if you keep at it, you may well become an authority on that particular experience that you had, which most likely is an experience that was not a satisfying one. Remember, I said negative experience more likely than a positive. So basically, what you have gone through is the Ichha state, the desire state, and the Gyan, the knowledge steps. Now, this is a very key inflection point. Most people stop by saying, okay, I've learned about this, I understand this, I understand my feeling here, and they stop. Yes? No? But once in a while, this is so powerful, so overwhelming, you say, no, I'm not going to stop. I'm no longer going to stop knowing. I no longer want to stop by being a contributor. I want to be a creator. This is a moment of truth for a creator. You take this energy you feel, this notion that you're not going to stop with the knowledge of what happened and why it happened, now in the grip of Shakti. And you say, you know what? I want to work on it. It's no longer about Ichha, it's no longer about Gyan. It's showtime. It's Kriya time. This emotion that you had turned itself into a ras. They call it ras or juice. You can taste it now physically. You begin to feel deep inside you that something was not right about this interaction or experience, that there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better experience. You feel deep inside you that there's a better mousetrap. Now, interestingly enough, the works of Subhash Kak, and those of you who haven't read him, please read his works. And many other scientists have actually validated a very interesting axiom that was propounded in Kashmir. Your consciousness knows before your mind knows. The answer is there in your consciousness. And interestingly, Tim Galloway, the legendary tennis coach, and who has written a series of books called The Inner Game of Tennis, sold multiple million copies, golf, inner game of work. He has used this very principle in very practical applications. So this notion gripped with that somehow you have to find a better answer, that there is a possibility of a higher state. This now, for an entrepreneur or a creator, session. Shakti is now in total control of you. This energy has gripped you. Most of the time, this state that you are in, intense suffering. That is what is called passion. Latin term meaning suffering. To be an entrepreneur, creator, is to go through this phase of suffering. Hey, I'm looking for somebody with passion. It's not just only about somebody saying I'm committed or I have conviction. When I invest behind venture capitalists, I look at their pain tolerance. They have the ability to go through that period of suffering, which is so critical before you can actually have something that will manifest itself. And to know that, you have to see the strength within them. You have to see whether they have the Shakti to overcome this degree of pain. So if you decided that, okay, I'm one of those guys who's gripped by this passion, by this madness, I really want to pursue this thing. Of course, you say, all right, what is the starting point? And in my earlier talk, I talked about the grand Sharda equation. The grand Sharda equation is that any performance, any experience equal perfect experience minus the imperfections that arise from ignorance. Great equation, which in many ways is even greater than Einstein's energy equation, is the Pratyabhijna Hridayam Sutra 4. And it is the starting point, examining your experience and saying, how does one come up with a better answer? So, where do you start? Well, believe it or not, really the first place you start, not with trying to solve the problem. This is an inner journey after all. The first place you start is, you start with your own self. The worst thing on earth is if your starting point, your desire, is to get rich quick or get famous quick or get anything quick. If your desire isn't pure, you're not going to create something sustainable. And so it's very important that when you start with wanting to do something, make the world into a better place, that you tie your search for a better answer to a higher than what you experienced, than what you encountered, because only truths that are higher will have longevity. The higher the truth, the higher the sustainability. In modern lingo, using a businessman's words, the higher the value added, the better prospects you have for your proposition. It's high. And it is here that you begin to get a sense of, why organizations fail and why the open system sometimes works. Existing organizations are all about incremental thinking. But the Kashmiri framework, and one that's being increasingly adopted, is to think the exact opposite. The Kashmiri framework always said, you start from the very top. You start from the very end. You start with the biggest idea that you can come up with. If that is not possible, then you back down one step till you reach a state that is higher than today, you can operate that. So this is a very deep technique here that is very important in terms of thought process. You don't start with how do I create a better life? You start with the question, how do I create the perfect experience where there was a flaw that I ran into which gave me this negative experience? By starting with that perfect experience, then you slowly back off, but never do incremental thinking. Never. That is the death knell of great innovation. Now I'm going to share with you the second very simple universal technique. Whatever experience you had that was flawed, in the majority of cases, that happened because there was some duality, some division, some disconnect that was at the root cause of it. If you think deeply and say, okay, how can I create some connectivity? Whether it may be at the level of information, whether it may be at the level of relationship. How do I create that connectivity? How do I create that oneness? How do I remove that duality? And to see the emergence of a way forward. To give you a framework on the way forward. Let me repeat. As you begin to construct your solution, you have to reflect a higher truth than what is present today. To look at what created the duality, what created the imperfection, and see if you can find connectivity, non-duality, that can begin to operate on. And then you have to say, how do I gain knowledge of that particular connectivity device so that I can now begin to articulate a solution? And the text, the Virupaka Sapanka Shikha, verse 448 is emphatic. Emphatic. It says, destroy incomplete knowledge by firmness of possession of complete knowledge. Then you become the master of the universe. How do you do that? How do you gain knowledge beyond what everybody knows about it? Everybody knows there is to know, which is what resulted in that initial experience. It's here that the Shiva principle enters, and those of you who understand Shiva is very simply freedom. The act of creation of the universe arises from his playfulness. And the first thing he does is he creates a Brahma. Ancient texts tell us, when you start on the creativity, the first thing you should tell yourself is, I am bigger than Brahma. Now you say, oh, I'm just a puny human being. Bigger than Brahma. Brahma created the entire universe. Aha, say the ancient texts. Poor Brahma has so many constraints. When he is creating the universe, he has to observe the laws of gravity, he has to observe the laws of karma. Totally constrained creator. But you are not bound by any of those. Brahma. So this simple device, this simple story is to really nudge you that as you look at the imperfection you're studying, as you're looking at the problem that you're analyzing, bring degrees of freedom to it. Play with it by releasing the constraints. Modern day lingo, thinking outside the box. Thinking outside the box is all about releasing the constraints. Be playful. So, again, our ancient texts explicit. And those of you who know how to move from the analytic into the associative thinking, meditation yoga is certainly a technique. X says concentrate your Shakti, concentrate your energy, because energy and consciousness is identical. And I said earlier on that the answer you're looking for is known to consciousness. What we have to figure out is how to get our mind to recognize it. That's the only challenge. So the texts say, take your Shakti, take your energy. It's the same thing. Concentrate it. Concentrate it. And the techniques of concentration, obviously, they're talking about meditation, about yoga. Concentrate it on your sense fields, your organs of action, the knowledge of the mind. Remove your ego, the sense of I amness. That's another constraint. And when you do that, you will end up owning the karma. You will own the karma of that particular thing. Now, this may be a little bit too cerebral for many people, but there's an equally simple technique. If you really want to become creative at a given point in time, but don't travel to tourist places. Travel to weird places. Travel to places which are going to challenge your controlling patterns, habits, axioms. Travel in a way that does not reflect your normal life. The whole idea is to shake your way of thinking. It's not surprising that when Barry Diller sold his company, he took 6 months off and got in a car and drove across America. I mean, the guy has a private jet, that pattern. And he wanted to just do it in a different way so that he could change completely the way his mind looks at it and thinks about the world. Do this and keep trying. You'll test many ideas, you will discard many ideas. But one day, you'll have a eureka moment. You'll have a moment, aha. This idea that you were seeking will suddenly gel and into your mind. But it is here, yet God. And I see that all the time when entrepreneurs come to me, they come to me with a great idea. But it's here that you have the highest failure rate. You have to guard against fantasy. Now, what separates fantasy from reality? Very simply, it's Maya. I'm not of the school that Maya is illusion and all that nonsense. Maya is something very simple. It's what separates the measurable from the immeasurable. So when you have a great idea, just look at it, examine every aspect of it, and say, can I measure it? The aspect of that idea. If you can measure it, then you have an idea that will meet the test of every reality. Now you have something that can stand up to due diligence. It's not only a new and higher truth. It's not only practical. It's not only value added. Go to market with it. But it is at this stage that you now step into the world of Lakshmi. Lakshmi is the icon of wealth creation, and I use that only because and that's how we measure ideas. And if you look at Gaja Lakshmi, the artist could not be more explicit in the message they are giving you. Couldn't be more explicit. Sit on a lotus. A lotus is a symbol of creativity. But don't look at Lakshmi. Look at what's around it. You will find Gaja Lakshmi is invariably shown with two mentor elephants behind her and two killer lions at her feet. The hunters who will go and get you business, and then the wise people who will help incubate your idea. Wolf when you're trying to create or be an entrepreneur. Follow the Gaja Lakshmi model. Get yourself two killer lions who will take your idea and go conquer the world with it, and get yourself two mentors. And why two? Well, because if one has a failure rate, you're not hanging by a single thread. So let me end now with a small story, and then I can answer questions and give you actual life examples. Buddha had a real life experience, Gautam. He had a real life experience, tried to figure out what it was all about. It became a stable emotion with him. He obsessed over it. And he said, you know what? I can't, this is not going to let go of me. After his suffering, he went and he starved himself for 40 days. And if you see the statues of him, he was a skeleton. He moved into the knowledge acquisition phase. He went around, talked to everybody, the known. And he knew that he was seeking a higher truth. He knew that he had to get knowledge of the unknown. It eluded him. He had a near-death experience. That's not atypical for a startup. All startups go through near-death experiences. 9 days, there was a moment of liberating insight. That thing manifested itself from consciousness into his mind. He runs into two brothers, Tapusa and Bhalika, merchants. They were his first two lions. The rest, as they say, is history. Buddha built what is perhaps the most enduring institution known to mankind today. Entrepreneurs can do worse than study in terms of how to create institution. So let me summarize. 5,000 years of compressed learning here on how to foster creativity, and I'll give you the key seed words. It's self-awareness. Focus on your daily experiences. Out of all of your emotions, precipitate a stable emotion. Research it. Learn about it. If it still intrigues you, Shakti will grab you. You are now in the Shakti drive mode. About it. But don't immediately run to solve the problem. First, purify your own desire. Why is it that you want to pursue this madness? Seek the higher truth, because it's the lower truth that created the frustration, the dissatisfaction to begin with. And when you seek the higher truth, recognize that in most cases the problem arose because there was duality, there was disconnectivity. So the answer lies in unity. In reaching that answer of unity and connectivity, degrees of freedom, strengths. Just play with them, remove them one by one, and see what is possible. You're now moving from the Shakti drive mode, and it is in that phase, whether you physically travel to strange places or whether you travel through yoga or meditation, that if you're blessed, you will manifest from your consciousness the higher proposition. Stress test the higher proposition with the Maya principle. Measure every aspect of it. If you believe it's measurable, proof answer. Now you have to execute it. You know the answer, but you have to execute it. You have to build the enterprise. Invoke the Gaja Lakshmi team. Thank you. That's the inner journey of creativity and entrepreneurship.
Great,
Let us
thank you
meet
so
with
much.
you.
I think it's very interesting to always listen to hear Rakesh Uncle talk, because he brings different aspects of life into any topic, and he's a great storyteller, and I am so interested in asking a few questions. And I really learned a bit more about what I am feeling also, but also a lot about you and how you actually project outside of the last Queen of Kashmir, and so on and so forth. It was really nice to see you in this avatar, if I may add that.
I didn't think of that word, but thank you.
Great. It was very enlightening. Thank you so much, Rakeshji. I will open the mic to the panelists if they want to ask some questions, and then we can go ahead with discussing more. We do not have a time constraint, even though it's close to 1, unless you're hungry. We do not have a session after this, so I think we are we are kind of open on this. You guys want to?
Thanks, Rakesh Uncle, for 2 great discussions. I do have 2 big questions, but for anybody who's just starting to watch now, just a brief background on Rakesh Uncle. He did write a book called The Last Queen of Kashmir. You can see the YouTube link on the Facebook groups, KOA Youth, and the General Kashmiri Overseas Association page, if you want to see his talk, if you missed it. But he has attended various distinguished schools back in India as well as here. And he's the CEO of many multi-billion-dollar companies. And he's written a lot in newspapers and magazines. He has a vast knowledge base. I'm sure you guys who have been able to watch from the morning were able to tell. So I do have 2 questions for you, Rakesh Uncle. The most interesting part of your talk, I think, was where you were talking about suffering, and how a great entrepreneur is not just one that has a lot of passion and a lot of knowledge and good work ethic, but someone who is willing to suffer a lot. I've seen that in my own path to my career. I'm in medicine, but I think that holds true in any career in this day and age now. So we all have heard the phrase, no pain, no gain. My parents have always told me that growing up, to kind of encourage me to pursue, further education, etc. So my first question to you would be, how would you encourage people who are not necessarily on the path to becoming an entrepreneur? So someone maybe like me, 10 years back, when I was deciding to pursue something in science, how would you motivate or encourage those youngsters to still learn about entrepreneurship, and how would creativity help them in their own lives?
Okay, so creativity is a juice within you that gives you a bliss, a joy, nothing else. So to miss out that in life is to really miss out on the greatest gift that life gives you, which is the power to create. The fundamental advantage women have over men. That one of the things women are blessed with biologically is the power to create. It is a remarkable, remarkable uh, uh, capability we have. And to not use it, I think, is missing out. Now, in your profession, you can be creative in different aspects of your life. At the end of the day, whichever aspect of life you decide to be creative, it will give you more happiness than anything else. Happy. So please, please, please don't restrict yourself to the fact that you want to be a doctor. My wife is a doctor. Loves little children. She's a pediatrician. And she's creative in other areas. And that's fine. That's okay. The second thing about suffering is this. Latin term, suffering, passion, but really the correct thing that's happening to you biologically is you're undergoing purification. Becoming purer so that you can arrive at that higher truth, that better answer, that better mousetrap. And there are techniques that can help you, that can make it short, that can get you to the answer. And that was what I was basically suggesting. You don't have to suffer, because people who suffer, for them, creativity becomes a spontaneous event. But if you train yourself, it'll be much shorter.
Great. Thank you. So we have a question from Sanjay Razdan from Facebook. He just messaged me. He just gave a feedback first, and he said, great talk and very important for people to learn and know about our roots, and very important for, they are very important for innovation and creativity. And he has a question, and he says, how to implement and create future entrepreneurs. And do you have any specific thoughts about it?
Well, that was the whole purpose of my talk. How to create is to be self-aware of the experiences that you're having. So let me now give you some actual stories, because I want to now give you stories. I've given you a theory. Let me give you some actual stories. The first person I worked.
I do have a few questions on my own, but do you want to go ahead with that first? Okay.
Let me answer that.
Yeah, sure.
So the first person that I worked for in my life, I joined a company called Norton Simon Inc. And he actually became well known to the Indians because he had a very famous museum in Pasadena called Norton Simon Museum. And he ended up with one of the most famous Nataraja statues, which later on was found to be smuggled. The government of India went after him. And finally, they had to settle, and Ambassador T.N. Kaul in Washington negotiated the settlement. So he's very well known. This is a long time ago. But Norton Simon Inc. was one day approached by a Swedish company. And they told them, they said, look, we own a matchbox. Company, but because of the environmental regulations, has a lot of phosphorus, other problems. We just want to get out of it. We'll actually pay you money to get out of it. Can you imagine? They were willing to hand over an entire business, and this was, I think, maybe around 45 years ago. So their entire matchbox business, they were willing to write him a check, and they just wanted to get out of it. Environmental liability. They said, you know, you're a small-time guy. If they come after you, they can't hurt you, but we are a big company. We can get out. So he thought about it for a minute. He was running a small canning operation, Hunt's tomato sauce. He thought about it, and I said, okay, you can give me the check, you can give me the factory, you can give me the business. He did that because he was selling Hunt's tomato sauce at that time, what the hell to do with it. And he started putting recipes on the back of the matchbox for how to use tomato sauce. He was the first person in the history of the world who saw the matchbox not as a way to light a fire. He saw the matchbox as an advertising way. So I keep coming back to the same point I make that Sanjay ji asked. How do you become creative? By looking at the experiences that you are having and then becoming self-aware. Each one of us has experiences, has opportunity to become creative and become entrepreneurial. Problem is that we close our mind, and when you close your mind, you can't have creativity. I have given the secret of opening the mind. Every night before you sit down, retrace, and you watch. That'll kickstart everything.
Great.
You become creative.
Okay. Sanjay, if it has answered your question, please let me know through the text. Thanks, Rakesh ji.
The answer, Sanjay, is this. Not how can I become creative, but to say to yourself, we are all creative, all entrepreneurs. The only question is for us to recognize. It's that recognition that we are blessed with creative power that is central to the proposition I'm presenting humbly in front of you. You just have to unlock that power.
Yeah, I think my question is related to that concept. It's more generally what my question is whether everybody can be an entrepreneur. That was my basic question, but a sub question would be, is this something that comes to you naturally? It should come to you naturally, and then, I mean, to me, for example, if when I created KOA Youth, it happened to me. I was not seeking it. It came to me. It came to me as an idea. I mean, I wouldn't lie that it was happening to me when I, would go to bed just before going to bed, and I would think about it. And the thing is that for somebody who is seeking out to make a lot of money and become very successful and become an entrepreneur, has capital but doesn't know what to do, is waiting for an idea. So can it happen both ways? Can it happen? I mean, it can happen one way that, that you meditate and you become conscious of your own feelings, what you really want and what resonates with you. And then it goes into creativity, and then you create it because you cannot hold yourself but create it. But can it also happen from the other side where you are like, I am ready to open a business and make money? Saying that, okay, fine, that means I might need to create something, so let me meditate. Can it work that way also? And my second question to that general question is, when do you give up? When do you say, that's enough, I don't think it's going to work?
Okay, so let me start with the second question. I shared with you numerous points where what you call give up happens. Very first, the experience you had, you forget for that imperfect experience today. I see a lot of that in India. People call that tolerance. Mm-hmm. They just tolerate. And so when you condition your brain and culture, then you give up. Tolerance is basically giving up, right? Mm-hmm. The point is that you learn everything, you become an authority, you say, I'll contribute, but you don't want to create and make it better. Yeah. Third is you actually construct an answer, but there is some aspect to it that's a fantasy. And that by the harsh reality of life. So there are many stopping points that occur. Perseverance is the name of an entrepreneur. But I think, Amrita, it is, to your point, historically was spontaneous, but was also a subject that was studied extensively. And so what I am suggesting is, by all means, the spontaneous process will keep going on. But if we have a systemic approach to it, then why not empower ourselves with it and accelerate everything? That's all. Mm-hmm. Both will happen.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, makes sense. I guess. I think it's better to be empowered than not, and why not? Yeah, you're right. Thank you. Umesh, you unmuted yourself. Do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Rakesh ji, for the answer. My question was more in terms of sense of identity linked with being creative. For example, I come from Jammu and Kashmir, was a refugee for 2 years. So when I came to US in 2009, I have a very unique way of looking at people and problems there. So when I actually a problem comes my way, I usually look at it from a different angle and viewpoint. So is it good to do it that way, or you kind of need to be part of a bigger grand narrative to figure out to be a creative? Is it dependent on how you think or where you came from? Is it good to link your identity with being creative or not?
So actually, that's a very good observation, and that actually is linked the point I made about traveling to places challenge the hard wiring of your brain. So think of it using that construct. Think of the immigrant phenomena. The immigrant who comes to America, everybody says, these immigrants tend to start companies, quite disproportionate to their numbers. Well, the reason is that the immigrant like you is coming from a very different mindset. Enter a different system, they see things that people who are within the system are blind to. Blind spot, because they were born in it, they grew in it, and they don't see it. You come from a different mindset, you come from a different way of looking at it, and you say, aha, there's an opportunity here. The error of the out-of-box point of view. So absolutely, you have an advantage, but the general principle is you want to basically be able to step out of the world you are in, back at it with a different perspective. That's what out of the box is.
Right.
You are able to bring that out of box. The problem in India, for example, is this, that I come back to it, which is blind to the world they live in. And so it's not surprising that they have had to bring innovation from outside, train themselves to saying the only metric to look at life is perfection. Anything that falls short of perfection, when you reverse it, when you look at it from that point of view, the way Abhinav Gupta teaches us to look at life, then you watch. Creativity starts getting a kick in the butt because people are not going to settle for anything unless it's perfect.
Right. Thank you.
Rakesh uncle, thank you for your answers. I just have one more question for you.
Yes.
From more of a practical standpoint for the younger people that are watching now or are going to watch this later, students and young adults.
Mm-hmm.
what tips would you have for them as far as what steps they can take to get an early head start, successful entrepreneur, not just in terms of coursework that they can take and internships, because everybody sort of does those things, but how can they set themselves apart? Do you have any tips as far as that goes?
Yeah, so if you are young, you look at people today, what their world is, you can very quickly see that their world is very, very different than the world that preceded them, right? Fair to say? It's a very, very different world than the world that preceded them. The half-life of knowledge, the 5 years, now has become 2 years, right? They're going to face a challenge that most of the jobs, as I alluded to, driven by mechanical activity, are going to disappear. So for the youngsters, they absolutely have to be creative, So my suggestion to the youngsters is this. Remember what I said earlier. This is an inner journey. It's best to travel in small groups. So what, if I was a youngster, what I'd do is I would, if you're a doctor, don't pick another doctor. Find somebody who's in music. Find somebody who's a physicist. Find somebody who's a writer. Create your group of 4 people, right? Fellow, reasonably close in age. And just agree that once a month, you're just going to meet and have lunch together. Something. Make it a regular activity. And when you meet, just talk to them about a certain experience that you're obsessing about. Now, it may turn out in a given month, there was nothing there that you obsessed about. Fine, have a great breakfast, great lunch. But in the process of doing this, something will emerge. And your support system, because support system more than somebody at my age does, your support system will then begin to give you some feedback, guidance. And if you reach some point, follow the Gaja Lakshmi principle, call me, say, Rakesh, I need a mentor for this particular thing. And I'll set you up. I'll set up any youngster with the right mentor, and we'll kickstart the idea. Start practicing. Start practicing this notion of self-awareness, of understanding your experiences, and figuring out a better world. And the way to do it is to discipline yourself, because if you create a group, then you know what? Once a month, you know it's sitting there waiting for you. Then begin to practice this.
I think that's a fantastic suggestion for younger people, even myself. I consider myself a young adult. To be able to invest in your creativity and your right brain at a young age, just being very intentional about it from an early age. I think that would have helped me a lot when I was younger. So that's a great suggestion.
No. Remember the Kashmiri model. The case is right brain, left brain, and super brain. I've shared with you is designed to basically ignite all 3. Left brain, super brain. You got the analytic, you got the associative, and then you got the creative.
That's fantastic. I really like the explanations Rakesh uncle gives. Thank you so much, Rakesh uncle. If you want, before winding, unless anybody else has questions, Sanjay did say that it answered. He said, "Thanks for throwing more light on entrepreneurship, Rakesh uncle." So he's satisfied with the answer. So before you leave, I was just wondering if you would like to share with us your journey of at least one instance of creativity from the time in bed while you were thinking and meditating about your day to creating a company or something, or an example of something that went like an end-to-end example, real life example of your personal experience.
Okay, so I'll share one example. Into a company called Finger Hut, which was facing a big crisis. Company was a leader, about $2 billion in revenue. It was a direct marketer, but primarily and exclusively to the lower socioeconomic strata of America. And its customer base was people who did not have any credit cards. So, because they didn't qualify. And we had a remarkable formula. You know, we would send them catalogs. They could buy their wedding ring. They could buy electronics. They could buy furniture, whatever. And we would simply sell it to them on trust and plans. A company is located in Minneapolis. Now, Finger historically would operate levels of 11%, 12%. And for those of you who are not in the world of business, companies operate with bad debt of 3 to 4%. So you have to understand that Finger Hut was really operating on steroids with that level of, meaning people who would buy merchandise and never pay for it, right? So I was brought into the company because there was a huge crisis, and I was asked to come in as the chief operating officer because this bad debt to 16, 17%, that's horrible, right? It basically kills the profitability of a company, and very, very difficult situation for any company to be in. So I came in, worked with the team, did the short-term things, fixed it, and brought it under control. But I thought about this, and I realized that this thing would happen periodically. That this company, and for example, any company, whether you're a mortgage lending company or any company, they go through this periodic crisis. And then one day, I kicked myself. I said, I come from a Kashmiri framework where we don't have a notion of bad and good. That is a Western notion, and you guys can research the morality. I don't have a notion of bad and good. I don't have a notion of bad people. My framework is a framework of ignorance. Some people have greater knowledge and some people have less knowledge. Less knowledge behave in ways that are self-destructive, and people who have greater knowledge behave in ways that are more enlightened. So I come from a knowledge framework. That's the only framework I come from. And if I, as a Kashmiri, with this knowledge framework, looked at Finger Hut, the moment of epiphany that I had was, my God, these people that we call bad debt, we know more about these people than even they know about themselves. We can predict their behavior even before before these poor people can predict their behavior. And oh, by the way, we never used to share this data with the credit bureaus. So this was totally proprietary.
Mhm.
Wow. These are not bad people. These are good people. They're good people because I know them. I know them better than they know themselves. So I say, you know what? We are going to go ahead and open a brand new company and issue credit cards to them. We're going to be inclusive. We're going to create connectivity for them with the broader economy because hey, a credit card is like a passport. You can't go to many places without having a credit card. So people thought that was crazy, but I said no. And one of the things you get when you're the top dog, do things, right? Now, I know a certain president has perhaps gone a bit too far.
That's amazing. Yeah.
But we went ahead and within a couple of years, at a time when dollars were real, we built a company, a brand new company that I think $1.5 billion of asset value, real dollar value, not paper value. And we were the pioneers unbanked market. And just to tell you sometimes how a good thing can then suddenly see. When I started this whole foray unbanked market, I think the total securitization, for those of you who are in business, the total securitization that I was able to get was $500 million. That was sort of the limit of how much I could extend. And fast forward to the mortgage crisis, that the amount of lending to the unbanked market, several $1 trillion. So that opened, floodgates for that entire market of 40 million Americans who prior to that sort of had been treated as bad guys. Mm-hmm. So this is what happens when you actually take a framework, you apply it, and you can create some very powerful business models. I hope that story is proof that the stuff works.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's something that I really wanted to hear from you. So it's, I always understand it better when it's put in, perspective and an application. And I really thank you for explaining it so well, and for your time and with the panelists here. Thank you for joining us. Unless you have more questions, I guess I'm getting hungry. So, and I guess I've kept Rakesh ji more than I have for like at least half an hour more than I have promised. But thank you so much for being so accommodative and so educative to all our audience here. We had a bunch of viewers online right now live, and I'm pretty sure the video is going to be watched. From every part of the country and the world, that will be shared. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rakesh ji.
Thank you, Amrita. Thank you. This is a gift. This is our heritage. This is our legacy. Legacies should never constrain you. Legacies should only be the foundation stone on which you can build the future. It's been my privilege to transmit this. I salute our ancestors. You youngsters, may you be empowered by this knowledge. Have a great day.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Umesh and Nisha. It was great to have you online with your questions. It was really great. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.